Hello, welcome to the special session here, July 26, 2018, to discuss our delete options. Put yourself in the meeting notes. Thanks for coming. We have a document with a bunch of options we're going to run through, I guess, to try and provide a fair and objective way to evaluate these things. I was thinking maybe we could come up with some kind of a rubric that asks us to look at what we care about and then ask us how much we care about it. And I wrote some cases down. And I'm sorry to spring this on you at the last minute here, but maybe we could go over those options and think about it. Otherwise, I guess it's just time to jump into the options and discuss those. So questions, and what would people like to do?
No, I like your list. I think those are all very important things we need to find out, who cares about what, because they're all very good topics. But at some point, I do think we should look through the other document and the list of options that people put forward to make sure people understand what each option actually means and there's no confusion about them.
Sure. Should we go through the first list that's in this document right here, or do you want to?
I don't have an order preference. The order doesn't matter to me. Either one works.
Since we're looking at this, let's just discuss this right now. My rubric is basically, two scales for each option should be, how well does this achieve the objective that we wrote down as an option, and then how much do we actually care about solving this problem. So the first thing I wrote down is implementable with CRD. We haven't made an actual decision on this yet, and the decision being whether or not to go to CRDs and dump the API server. It seems to be something that is desired on multiple fronts for multiple reasons. So it seems like it's a fairly important objective, but it's more of a long-term one rather than a right now, unless a CRD implementation appears out of nowhere soon. So I've got this sort of behavior thing broken up into a couple. Change of user experience basically being how much if we do provide the same user experience to an end user, how much extra wrapping layers and how much does the client library have to do versus it's a straight pass-through from user interaction to API interaction.
Morgan, did you want to talk about each one of these as you go through them, or wait till you're done?
We can do that. Sorry. Did you have something here? Yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah. My question or comment on the implement with CRDs is, for the most part, it does sound like it is kind of an important thing for people in the long run. At least it seems like a fair number of people do want to head that direction, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that. My only question is, do we have a sense for how set in stone CRD support is? So for example, right now, we know that some of the options won't work under CRDs because they don't have the right hook points for it. However, I don't believe that it means those hook points cannot be added for CRD support, because CRD support is still sort of in the works, right? It's in flux. They're adding features all the time. So I think it's important to understand that, when we say, does it work with CRD? Does a particular solution work with CRDs? There's two different answers. Does it work today with CRDs? And is it possible for CRDs to change to add support for what we want to do, or for that particular option, right? That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to adopt that hook point that we may need, but it's an important distinction, because just because CRDs doesn't support today doesn't mean in 2 months it won't.
Oh yeah, I have a question about that. So Doug, you're starting a working group, right, with SIG Arch to talk about what they would be willing to consider long term. Is that right?
Sort of. I still need to send out a note to the KubeDev mailing list to see if there's interest in forming a working group. But yes, if the working group does get formed, then yeah, we're going to have a work group to talk about, do we want to support these use cases and what's the possible best way forward to support them?
If, let's say that like we make that working group and then say it like takes a month and then something comes out of it, what would be the earliest like Kubernetes release that could have the changes in? I'm just trying to get like a best case scenario of like, how long would it take for us to have to sit and wait on doing the CRD migration while we wait for something from the working group to land in CRDs? You know what I mean?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how we answer that one. It's completely
Best
unknown,
case
right?
is it 1.13 maybe?
I mean, it's possible, right? I mean, it depends on the will of the community, right? If the will of the community
Yeah.
looks at these use cases and say, hey, these are super important, and it only requires a 5-line code change, then yeah, they can get it in 1.13. If they look at it and say, oh my God, we need to really think long and hard about this, and that it's going to take a couple of release cycles, it just seems like a total unknown to me.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to get a feel for like, if best case, we're still going to have to wait months and months and months. Like, it's probably worth looking at both sides of that, like CRD today versus CRD after the working group. Sounds like we can't just look at one or the other. We have to do both.
Yeah.
So based on our discussions with SIG architecture, I can't say that there was any interest in like introducing such behavior in CRD, I believe. So I would say that it's probably safe to assume that it will never make it to CRD, because it's like the only reason why we can implement such behavior in API server is that we have so much power, and in CRD I don't think they really want to do that. So they already have all kinds of like admission webhooks and other kinds of like integrating intercepting requests and so on. I think they would say that there are already ways of customizing the behavior. It's just not the one proposed there.
I'm not sure you can really say that though, right? I mean, at one point in time, all the various hook points that in Kubernetes never existed, and yet they were added slowly over time. So I don't think it's fair to say that additional hook points may not be added to CRDs. We just don't know.
No, I disagree, because there was support for admission controller for a long time, and like the only problem with that was that in order to introduce new admission controllers, you would have to recompile the entire Kubernetes. Then they introduced these admission webhooks for both API servers and CRDs as well. And for CRD, I don't think we have this point of extension where we would hook, because again, in the docs it clearly says that there is a deletion type step field to integrate with for any kind of controller, garbage collection, and so on. And like, why would they change that for CRDs? I don't see any reason for that. It's like I guess it's the same as like CRD will never support anything but etcd as a backstore, right? And they made a conscious decision that like, even though, for example, Amazon wanted to introduce like abstraction layer to support DynamoDB, they just clearly said, no, we just want to use all the etcd 3 features and like just want to commit to using etcd all the way. So basically, they still probably able to hack something with API server, I don't know, but like Kubernetes at core doesn't want to support that. And I believe with this kind of like customizing deletion is also, I don't think they have any interest in it, unless there will be another like more major, more interesting use case than service catalog, I think.
I want to like clarify something. It was my understanding that what we were going to put up to the SIG to vote on is what to do in the intermediate term between now and whatever comes out of the working group. And whatever comes out of the working group is what's going to help set our long-term goals. But we're voting on what we can do today. Do we all agree on that? Because otherwise, it kind of changes what we want to like evaluate some of these on, like the possibility versus what could we start implementing tomorrow and submit a PR for. So I'm hoping we can say we're talking about just the short term, so that if I can't guess the future. If things change later, then we can reevaluate what we want to do. Right?
Yeah, I think in general I agree with what you're saying, Carolyn. I guess I'm not quite clear of the implications of that statement, though, right? Because if you're saying we need to make sure we have a short-term solution because we're living in the world we have today, right? And we can't assume anything in the future, and I get that. But does that imply we only need to care about API server, or does that mean we need to think a little bit longer ahead and know that we're probably going to move to CRDs and take that into account given the current state of CRDs? Because you can go either direction with that, right?
I think that our ability to move to CRD is within our control, and I believe all major roadblocks that we had previously to consider adopting it, we've figured out. And so for me, it's like, it's not a huge thing out of our control to say we as a SIG want to move to CRD, and that's something we'd like to do in the near term future, versus the working group stuff, which unfortunately, like, we have very little control over. We can argue our case, we can talk to other SIGs and people who have similar use cases, but if SIG Arch doesn't agree, like, we don't have much to do about it. So like the CRD feels like worth including in this discussion, because it's just, the probability is a lot higher that we can just do it if we want it, right?
Right. I agree. So I think what you're saying is the current state of things is probably move to CRDs, and that should be part of our short-term decision planning thing. And I'm okay with that decision. I just wasn't sure when you started talking about short-term decisions, is going to CRDs part of that short-term decision process, or is it a long-term thing? And you're saying short-term, and I'm okay with that answer.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. If we all agree to that, that's cool. I just want to make sure that, like, when people vote, they understand what they're voting on. It'll be, let's just say, like, what we could do in, like, the next 2 releases of Kubernetes. Does that help us focus on what we want to do for our rubric?
I think so.
Great. Okay, then I'm happy.
There's another, I don't know where to put this or word it or that kind of thing, so I'll just say it straight up. I don't know if, let's say, I don't agree that we need to fulfill the full purpose that is set out in the problem description. I feel, and maybe this is just part of the discussion of the solutions, I feel that if there is a check available, and we check with the broker about doing the delete, and then, and it's part of the flow, I don't know that I care about the time between a pre-check and a delete, and the broker, changing his mind and saying, and Doug, I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is that
I think we're getting too into the description of the actual problem, the actual solutions here. I want to either finish out the rubric or move to the discussion.
I think it is part of the rubric. I think I'm saying I don't know that I agree with the full mission statement here.
Okay, that's a different discussion.
Well, it would be nice to make sure we're all trying to solve the same problem, right? If we have different goals, then they're probably going to come up with different.
Okay, well, I can assume for the second here that everybody's read this paragraph, and
which paragraph?
Move to the actual problem statement then on the other document.
We can finish going through these, Morgan. That's fine.
Well, I don't want to force it. I'm just saying, I'm trying to get it. I think I covered this one enough. By API behavior, how did things look at the sort of non-user level, the API provided? Have we blocked delete? Are spec and status the only things modified by the controller or the user? That kind of stuff. This is kind of maybe part of it, but I think it's a little outside of the API specifically, and basically what does an observer expect to see happen, and are we violating that? I think this is a little looser thing personally, but the last thing I added based on the running commentary here was basically short-term think about the implications for how we do this now versus how we do this later, which I guess is the underlying issue I'm talking about when I say about the CRD thing. That finishes out that. Any other questions or any thoughts or anything you want to put on there for people to consider? Okay, no, I just wanted to prime your thought process here when we look through this, and maybe we can semi-objectively try to evaluate the thing. Okay, so apparently I was at the bottom of the document. Let me make this bigger. Okay, so problem statement. Do we want to just read this aloud or discuss the issues with it directly? Or Doug, I think you wrote this mostly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to read it to you guys. I guess the question is where is there disagreement on the problem statement?
I think that some of these solutions operate under the assumption that preventing the scenario of the manual cleanup is the full, like, it must be part of the solution. Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the solutions just attack like the 80% case, we'll say, but still allow for.
Right. The real reason I was coming at this, Doug, was that I feel that there's, you look at the pros and cons of each solution, each proposed solution, and I guess the family of solutions that I feel I would support, they all have objections raised by, well, these don't fit the solution, or these don't answer, they don't fix the problem. And I think that what the real problem is that you want to be able to issue a delete, and you want the broker to be able to have final say in it. And if that delete ends up in a non-delete, you don't want it to be in a delete state. And I guess given the way that Kubernetes works with the model, my feeling is that I don't know. Maybe this is just best left to the vote. My feeling is that with the pre-hook, with the pre-check, if things change between a pre-check and the actual deletion, that's fine. That's a kind of an expected edge case that results in a wedged problem, a wedged resource that needs to be dealt with.
Right. No, and I think that discussion is a good thing to have when we talk about that particular proposed solution. But that's different than the question of, is there something wrong with the problem statement?
So I have raised some concern with the problem statement from my side, and I think that so like this statement implies that Kubernetes has incorrect behavior, which is not compliant with OSB spec, and I think that this is not necessarily true, because like Kubernetes has their own like design, documentation, and so on. And there is like a Kubernetes API style and like how everything works, how should you integrate with Kubernetes system, and so on. And service catalog as a like API server or CID, it doesn't matter. It should be like Kubernetes compliant in that matter. So I believe that the problem we actually have now is that we have a service catalog server which is Kubernetes compliant, and we have OSB spec which has a corner case which is not like not 100% compatible with this Kubernetes compliance. And this is the problem we really have here, is that like when the user issues a delete in service instance, for example, in Kubernetes, user doesn't do anything wrong. And if Kubernetes like authorization, admission, webhooks, validation, whatever, if it bypasses all these checks and it makes it to the etcd change, there is nothing wrong with that. The problem is that when service catalog as a controller tries to sync two systems, one is Kubernetes as a platform, and then the other is OSB broker, and there is like definitely a mismatch. There is a corner case where one picture of the world doesn't match the other. And for me, that's the problem statement. What do we do when we have a mismatch between two worlds? And this problem statement clearly says that broker is the right one and community is the wrong one, and communities should have never actually allowed this deletion. But to me, it's like we already have like Jay written a solution that like you can prevent this by this and that, which is also Kubernetes compliant. And I don't think that's saying that like we need to make service catalog not Kubernetes compliant. That's how I read this problem statement, and I disagree with it.
So I don't think the problem statement necessarily says one side is necessarily right or wrong. It's more stating the state of the world, right? In the sense that Kubernetes does set the deletion timestamp. The service broker can say no. And you're right. The problem is we have two different views of the world and we're trying to reconcile those. But I don't think the problem statement says who's right or who's wrong.
So you're saying that
just saying there's a mismatch.
Yes, but you're saying that service broker cannot say no, but it's not like with the current OSB spec, there is no point at which OSB can say it in the Kubernetes compliant way. That's when we introduce this extra endpoint where broker will be able to say no. Right. And currently it's just like controller just says like, here is my view of what like desired state is, and it has a deletion timestamp. And I will try and make it happen in the real world. If it can't make it happen, it doesn't mean that something in Kubernetes is wrong or it should be rolled back or anything. There is no such thing as a rollback in Kubernetes, right? And I don't know. For me, that's...
No, I understand what you're saying. It's just you're talking about a particular solution, which is different than whether the problem statement is right or wrong. Because if the problem statement is saying if there's something in the problem statement that is incorrect, let's get that fixed. But I haven't heard anybody say what's incorrect about it. Just that their solution is the right one, even though someone says, no, it's not. Let's focus just on the problem statement and say, okay, what in here is incorrect? So we can fix that first.
So there is a statement which says, in essence, we need to be able to undo the update.
I'm trying to see where that is. It sounds familiar, but where is that?
Yeah.
There it is. Okay, thank you.
It just highlighted now.
Okay, right.
There's no such thing as undoing something. Like, I know that like for update case, which it's, I think it's written somewhere below, that for updates, we can undo our edits, but it's basically like, there's no such thing as undo. It's just users will apply the previous picture of the world. It has remembered somewhere. There is no such thing as like reversing, rolling back, or like, there is no history of changes, nothing like that. There's no commit on transaction. Like, and for me, this statement is confusing. And also, if you scroll down, the main reason why I actually started commenting on this problem statement was that probably it was Morgan who said that like it doesn't fix the problem. For me, it's like this is not an option, and I disagree with it. Main reason being that I see the problem from the different perspective, right? We all understand that there is a problem of getting stuck where you cannot do anything because broker won't allow the deletion and Kubernetes won't allow undoing the deletion. For me, like I think everyone agrees with that. But when we say that like Kubernetes should be able to undo the update, for me it's too strict requirement, because it already implies some implementation details or API change details and so on.
So I added some more to that sentence to make it clear that we only need to really undo if we allow kube to set the deletion timestamp. I think that clarifies it. It's just stating, it's just basically stating the current behavior of what we're seeing. It's not necessarily proposing a solution or anything like that. It's not. It didn't mean to imply we have to support undo, because I actually don't want to do undo. It was just saying if we do allow it to set the timestamp, then in essence, conceptually, we're looking to do an undo, but obviously you can't, because that has a whole bunch of negative ramifications. So help me reword that then, if that phrasing is...
I think it's, again, already talking about implementation details. It's like, if kube does this, then we need to do that. It's already like verb driven. For me, it's like, here's the problem. We got stuck. Now we have many options, and one, like, I have actually added 0 option, which is do nothing, just document and let people fix the problem. Right? It doesn't like answer this question at all. How do you do this undo update? It's just like go and fix one system or another system, or delete the object and create a new one. It's just like we got stuck and we need to get out of this state to healthy state back. How we do this via undoing, redoing, proceeding with deletion, it's already implementation specific, in my opinion.
There.
You can see both sides of that.
Come on.
When I wrote some of those things, basically saying it doesn't solve the problem, I think my focus there was on that. We look at the requirements, and I think we need to talk about when we get to it, basically.
Okay.
Is the last bullet point, I guess, understandable, and then we can start discussion on the proposals. I mean, the deletion timestamp, the focus on that is driven by that's what people watch. That's what sets everything else in Kubernetes world into action. That's what starts the finalizers operating, et cetera, and so forth. So while we can consider it implementation detail, in my opinion, it's internal details that people are watching, even though they probably shouldn't be. So I don't know how to make that balance and write that down, but
I think actually the last item in this problem statement makes it clear that this is the problem we have, and this is why we get stuck, and this is why there is no easy way to get out of it.
Okay.
I think it's strong enough to, like, it basically gives the context, right? This is what we currently have, and we need to change something to get out of this situation.
Okay. Let's see. I don't see any other discussion. So we can start with 0, which I think we did want to have written down in the other agenda document at some point, which is basically the let everything fail and manually clean it up later. I think there's, it's a valid way to cover it. I think the user interface there is not good. But fix permissions, recreate the service instance. I think some of the just recreate it is problematic in terms of A, we have to know what to recreate, and it's gone, and B, when you delete some of these things, they recursively delete everything, making it not a recovery case so much as a backup and restore case, because there's not going to be it could wipe out a bunch of things. So that's that problem. And then in terms of your user view, they may be, from the broker's perspective, they may still be allocated and asking for some big expensive something when they have no visibility to it. So okay, anybody have other commentary?
Yeah, I just don't think it solves the problem, to be honest. I think it leaves your Kubernetes model in a state where the things are basically unusable. And that means that a user who shouldn't have been allowed to perform basically this action whatsoever has now moved the system into a state where things are basically busted. And I don't think
so when you say that, sorry, so when you say that user shouldn't have been allowed to, the user's request has passed the Kubernetes authorization and has passed all the validation and has passed all the admission controls, right? So from the Kubernetes perspective, there is nothing that would say that, hey, we have actually, there was some bug in the system or some breach which was used by the user, right?
But that's what
it was explicitly allowed by the user to make this change.
No, it wasn't explicitly allowed. It was implicitly allowed. It was yes, the thing went in. The fact that all the rules don't align with the backend system is not. I might not have access to the rules of the broker that say, you're not allowed to do this and that and the other thing. Like that's.
Well,
I feel like the focus everybody keeps saying is, we'll just make everything synced up all the time is not a plausible solution on its face. Prima facie, this is not a thing that we can say, oh yeah, just make sure everything's in sync all the time. That is not helpful. That's not a helpful suggestion.
Can I make a suggestion? We're halfway through. I think that we're spending a lot of time talking about if something solves the problem statement and then agreeing on the problem statement. Do you think it would help us if we kind of avoided requiring a solution to solve the particular problem as it's been worded and focus simply on answering questions about the various options that we have, just so we can ask questions and get a little further along so people can think about stuff more without requiring that we agree on the problem statement and then whether or not solutions solve the problem? Because I just have some questions I'd like to ask and get answered.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Carolyn. It seems to me we're just going to kind of, we're all in specific camps and we're going to argue it and we're not going to really achieve anything, versus we all know the end goal is to arrive at a community vote and move forward with the results from that. So I think questions, we ought to at least hit the questions first.
Okay, how do we arrange that?
Well, ask the question. Are there any questions on this proposal for 0?
Any outstanding things on case 0? Do we understand what do nothing and add documentation means?
Hey, Morgan, do me a favor. Double click on the space between the 2 pages. Thank you.
Whoa.
I forgot about that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. If it's okay, I was hoping I could just ask them before I have to drop off the call. I had a suggestion about the counter, for like a delete counter, and I read the responses, the comments on that, and I'm still a little confused, and I was just hoping to kind of hear it worded a little differently so that I can understand why the suggestion about the delete counter wasn't helpful. It was for the first option, because there was questions about like delete requested and the fact that it was a Boolean flag, and like naturally that brought up the question of like rolling back the Boolean flag. And I was just curious, like changing it from a bool to a counter regardless of the name. It sounds like that doesn't work, and I would just really appreciate understanding why, so that I don't keep wondering.
Actually, I think we agreed that like it's clear how to implement this. So from the implementation perspective, I don't have any questions on how would that work now. I'm just like unhappy with overall change, but I think your suggestion of using counter is a good one.
Oh, okay. So that, I'm glad I asked. So
it's basically Morgan has answered yes. I basically just added something to your information to give more context, as like in order for this option to work, it's not enough to just introduce new field. We also will have to reflect it in the status every time we process this field.
Oh, okay. Do you think that it would be helpful to update the option to use that instead of the Boolean so that people don't have to dig into that question each time? Like, do we think that that would be a useful change to the option, just so that when people are voting on them, like we don't have like 6 options. Hopefully we have 4, you know, so like we're not voting between the Boolean and the counter or anything like that.
Yeah, well, if whoever owns this proposal is happy with that, sure.
I think this one's Morgan's, right? Because this was your PR.
Yeah, I can update the text.
Thanks, appreciate it.
I appreciate.
I just want to avoid weird split votes. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, I agree. I appreciate your suggestion from the face-to-face on this, and you're right. We did not write that down as explicitly as we could have, and I agree that makes sense. And I will attempt to do it justice.
Thanks.
And Morgan, you might make a second pass through the cons and clean that out once you get that reworded.
Yep. Okay, so next question. I think we're just going to freeform this at this point and move from question to question if possible. So.
Okay.
Another one. Follow up.
Can I ask my other question then? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't mean follow up to this. I just meant. Shoot.
In the goal again about collapsing some of our options so we don't end up with split votes, it feels like exists externally, which is the 8th option, is a composite of 2 options. Am I understanding that right? It's actually like do one thing and do another?
I'm not sure, actually. I think it has some, like, I think it's written somewhere in the inline comments, but it's doing more than the first 2 options.
It's like,
and I'm not sure.
One and turns it into a 2-stage delete, right? You flip the flag, which is what option 1 is, but then instead of us, the controller, processing the delete, we have the user do the delete. Do I have that right?
Not just that, actually.
Okay.
With the option 8, you can also, once you deprovision the instance, for example, you can flip the flag back and provision it again without deleting. Does it make sense? So you're saying exists externally false, then service call goes and deprovisions the instance. Then user goes back and says, hey, exists externally true, and service call provisions it again, and so on. You can do that like as many times as you want without deleting.
Oh. Okay.
So it is a different option, I think. It has more code, more use cases.
Okay. So if people vote and they like the idea of setting a flag, but some people like the 2-stage aspect of 8 and other people like the simplicity of 1, we may end up where like 8 and 1 trash the vote and neither one comes out as a clear winner, even though maybe there's consensus about the general approach. So before I go, I was just curious, like, does this mean maybe I should change how we put the vote up, or give you suggestions about that?
So if basically what you're saying is, it sounds like that some people may be interested in some sort of merging of more than one of these, and if so,
Yeah.
I'd like to have those discussions someplace somehow. I'm not exactly sure the best way to do that, but if as a result of that we can put up another proposal that crosses off 2 or more of these that are in the doc, I think that'd be positive progress, and I think we should do that before a vote.
There was also like DPR opened by Morgan, which is option 1, I believe, and it has many comments on changing it to this exist externally implementation, I believe, because it was mentioned by Mike Kibe, I believe, in the issue, in the comments. So at least 2 or 3 people were complaining that like you should go and fix it to switch to exist externally first, and then we can discuss it. So that's why I added this option, because it was some disagreement on how to actually approach this. So my point is, whoever proposes the option 1 should first agree with others that option 8 is not more preferable than the option 1. But I am personally fine with merging 2, because that's where, like, just if we choose either option 1 or option 8, I believe there will be people who will like try to flip this from option 1 to 8 or vice versa, because they are very similar to each other from the problem they're trying to solve, but the implementation implications are different.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm silent because I'm not quite sure how to move forward.
Well, actually, what's interesting is if we could find some way to merge more of these and say, you know, I don't know whether 1 and 8 actually can be merged yet. I just don't think about that. But let's say for a moment they actually could be merged, but as a result of that, there may be different variants or different options within the scope of that merge proposal. That might be a way to reduce the number of proposals in front of us. That way we could say, yes, in general, we want to head that direction, but we still need to figure out the details of, you know, these tiny little bits of it. That would still help reduce the vote down to less choices, which I think is goodness.
Yeah. The other option is to switch to ranked choice. That would allow people to vote their preference in order. And then that would allow us eventually to figure out a 1 versus 8 without having to stick to like simple majorities.
Yeah, another thing in option 1, now we have this counter, but in 8 we will still have the Boolean flag, right?
Yeah, good point.
So like it does have some implications of how will you implement this.
I mean, it might be nice if we're talking about merging some of these, if someone could enumerate sort of what are the key points of the merged result, and then what are the things that are to be determined. So, for example, if I remember correctly, a key aspect of number 8 is 2-phase delete. I don't think number 1 was a 2-phase delete, and that's why I'm not quite sure whether they can be merged or not. But I'd like to understand those high-level points, in particular from the user's perspective more than anything else. As we start talking about these things.
Yeah, I think this is the key difference. I agree.
Would you be interested in proposing another option that's the combination of these two, that we could replace 1 and 8 with some other version, and then we'll hold off voting until we have that figured out, maybe, if that's possible?
Yeah, I can do this, but like I'm a bit confused because Mike is not in the discussions, and he was the one who proposed this option.
Okay.
And my proposed option was more aligned with the J's one. So basically, I will need to defend the option that I'm not a fan of.
Yes, I don't want to put you in that situation. Never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, I mean, I did block out that time tomorrow. I don't know if anybody actually wants to show up. Let's see what we're at. We're at 45. Are we going to need another meeting to keep going over this?
Those were all my questions. I don't know if anyone else had more.
So I don't necessarily have any questions, because I think I understand the proposals behind them all, but I do think it's worthwhile to have, I'm not sure what the right phrase is, whether it's brainstorming or even if it's just bickering, some kind of back and forth, because I'm not sure there's necessarily agreement on either the problem we're trying to solve or how much of the problem we're trying to solve. And let me give you a concrete example. Let's say we take a vote and we end up picking a solution that some people think solves the problem. But for other people, because it doesn't actually solve the problem they were trying to address, they may actually think doing that solution is worse than doing nothing at all. And so we've now adopted a solution that no one is happy with. And I think that's partially because we're not on agreement on really what it is we're trying to solve here. And some people keep referring to things as edge cases, and to me, they're not edge cases. They are the heart of the problem we're trying to solve. And so that disagreement there is something I'd like to see if we can resolve. Maybe we can't, and it just boils down to bickering, and that's fine. But at least I like to try to see if we can get over the hump and make sure we're all on the same page about what it is we're actually trying to do here.
Morgan, you're awesome. I put a suggestion under the problem statement. I didn't edit it. I just put it in as a suggestion. I don't know if it helps or not, and if it doesn't help, just ignore it. I don't know if this kind of addresses what you're talking about at all, Doug. I was trying to like come up with something that would move our problem statement a little farther away from technical details. And I was like, maybe it's helpful to just talk about the end user experience and not talk about the internals. If that doesn't help, that's fine. We can just delete it.
Oh, I really like this problem statement. I think it's much better than the we used to have.
So my concern with that problem statement is that it assumes, well, wait a minute. So it assumes that we're going to allow the user to get into what I would call a deleted state or a bad state, right?
It makes it so that a hard requirement that you can never get into that state isn't part of what has to be fixed. Part of the fix could be an adequate way to resolve that state. Because like 0, for example, the solution is clear documentation about how to address the situation once you're in it. And so this problem statement allows 0 to be a solution. That's all.
So I guess, so I guess as long as the ability to get out of that state doesn't cause more harm, then I would agree.
Okay, and I think the harm could be something that we talk about in the cons, but it would just make it so that it's less contentious about does it solve the problem, yes or no, which I think it feels like we spent a lot of time there, and this just allows us to maybe bypass some of those arguments. That's
yeah, I mean, that's fine. I don't necessarily have a problem with what you wrote there. I mean, to me, it all boils down to we have to allow things to get back to the pre-delete state. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether it's recreating it or yeah, got it. Yeah,
there's all sorts of ways to get to that. I was just trying to, like I said, make it a little shorter. So if you're all cool with that, maybe just click accept on it. I don't know. I'm just hoping it helps because I feel like the bickering is something we've been doing for months. So like I'm sure like if we meet tomorrow and we keep talking about the problem statement, like it'll keep going.
Okay, sorry about that.
All right, I have to drop. If we're meeting tomorrow, just let me know, and I'm happy to show up. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
So, more questions, more bickering. Oh no, what did I do? I scrolled. It sounds like, let's see, in the commentary, Jay and Null are discussing reconciling 5 and 6 somehow.
Yeah, and we just agreed that, and actually you see it now, X'd out 6. We're good there.
Okay.
So I'm gonna need to drop in a sec too because I need to run a phone call, but I do want to have a phone call tomorrow. If nothing else, discuss things like, for example, Jay, you brought up the question of why doesn't a pre-check type of thing, a new API, an open service broker API, solve the problem and stuff. And I'd like to discuss that, not necessarily to convince you of why.
Oh my God.
Although that'd be great. but to at least make you understand why I don't think that's possible.
Okay. That sounds fine, Doug. I'll be here.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. What was that? Oh my God, Morgan. What did you do?
Texas just walked in here, so I'm gonna have to.
No, you stay muted.
Who else is in the meeting?
Doug's here and a bunch of service catalog people.
All right, we'll let you work. We'll let you work. We just wanted to say.
All right, see ya. Oh shoot, I unmuted. Okay, so.
And it's recorded for all time.
That's part of the log for forever. Don't worry, it's only forever.
Okay, I got to go anyway. Bye, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.
Any last minute stuff? losing consensus ability here, I think.
I think we can just try to clean it up a bit before tomorrow. And Morgan, maybe just send out a note that, yes, we are meeting one last time tomorrow.
Yep. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, cool.
I'll do that. We'll attempt to clean up one. I will attempt to resolve 1 and 8. I'm not sure how successful I will be given the divergence in implementation background, but that just may mean there's two separate options. But I think we've winnowed things down pretty good, and there's only 3 or 4 or 5, I guess, real ones, which seems like a better place to be in than we started. So
yep, agreed.
I will send out the notice, and I hope to see everybody who filled out the thing tomorrow.
Sounds good.
All right, stop. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.